Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about one of the key principles of befriending grief. If you've been watching these videos, you know that there are three main principles of befriending grief in the program that I'm building, in the circles that I'm running, and in the book that I'm writing. And just a little brief overview, these principles are all around reconnecting with some pretty big disconnects in the grieving and loss world. And so the first principle is reconnecting to nature itself. The second is reconnecting with our true nature as human beings that live and die. And the third, which is what I'll be talking about today, is reconnecting with one another through communal grief practices. So it is no surprise that we have become very disconnected with one another, and for lots of very practical reasons. We've moved out of, small rural communities where we used to live really close with one another. Our families probably all lived in one little teeny tiny home together, including grandparents and little kids, neighbors, friends. We had more kind of like close-knit social life, that probably involved church or, things like that. We didn't go very many places because it just wasn't practical. Now we have the opportunity to go anywhere, right? Live anywhere, move out of the house. It's not very common these days for families, extended families, to live together intergenerationally. Now that's shifting and changing, and I'm really glad to see some examples of people starting to reignite that lifestyle. I think it's really important when it makes sense. And so that combined with, the biggie, the obvious one is the internet. Man, that just changed everything, didn't it? So I love it. I wouldn't be on this video right now if it weren't for the internet. I can share my messages far and wide. It's really great. I love it. And at the same time, it means that we have become more and more and more disconnected from one another. So it's really no shocker, or it shouldn't be, why so many of us find ourselves isolated in our grief, because people have lost the ability to even know what to do, know what to say, know how to be, and know how to support somebody that is in grief. And so we find ourselves in this day and age where it's more important than ever that we resurrect some of these communal grief practices so that we can grieve together once again. I love, love, love this man named Francis Weller. He wrote a book, and he's written books, and he's done a lot of podcasts. I've listened to him a lot. I found so much comfort in his approach after I lost my mom and dad in the fall of 2022. So he talks a lot about the fact that grief was never meant to be an isolated event. Grief, we were never meant to grieve alone. And he talks about communal grief. And so I really resonate with that, because over the course of my lifetime, I've had so much loss, and I have felt so alone in my grief. There hasn't been anything that I've been able to really turn to as something to do with somebody else. And so I'd like to introduce some of the advantages of grieving in community. One of the most practical ones, we actually do really well. So what do you think of when you think of after somebody loses somebody? What's maybe something that you think, I want to do something, I'll do this? Most people will make a casserole. They might make or buy a lasagna, and they bring it over. And that's wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm so glad we have that ritual. We have that way of supporting somebody. And at the same time, People kind of end up with a lot of lasagnas in their freezer, and that's where it pretty much ends, right? So if it continued, if the support continued, if the practices continued, that'd be great. But often they don't. And so when we think about grieving in community and supporting one another through these times that are really difficult, what ends up happening is our bonds become really strong. You know, when we rely on somebody and when somebody witnesses our pain, those bonds can become really unbreakable. And so we're missing out on that huge advantage of grieving in community. We learn from each other. We learn, what's helpful to hear so that when we are trying to support somebody else, we know what helped with us. There's only one way to find out, right? And that is to be with one another. So those are just some practical advantages of grieving in community. And I want to introduce you to this idea of ritual and ceremony. Now, a lot of people, when they hear ritual, for some reason, they think witchcraft. And it cracks me up because that's not at all what that means. Rituals are just really simple ways that we can create some structure and framework out of our very messy grief. So, as you know, grief is just so messy. It We can feel one way one moment, another way the next, day in and day out. There's ebbs and flows. It's a roller coaster. And so if we can introduce some really simple rituals into our lives, it can create some really nice frameworks that we can anchor our days in. And what I really love about ritual is it reconnects us, or it keeps the connection with our loved one. So a simple one that I love to do is just a simple candle lighting in the morning or in the evening or both. And so having just a little picture of your loved one, lighting a candle, and having the intention of connecting with them in some way can be very beneficial. And that's something you don't need other people for. You can do it yourself. Being with people, though, it takes that meaning and it really amps it up, because if you can share a little bit about that person, so you do the same ritual, maybe you have a circle, maybe you just have a real simple circle of friends, people that you can trust, though, really trust, really trust, that you can feel like you can break down in front of, you can cry in front of, you can be vulnerable with. Lighting that same candle, telling a story about your loved one, wishing them well, and then allowing other people to witness the pain that you feel, witnessing those tears. It's really, really, really powerful to do that. And people often walk away feeling lighter, feeling supported, feeling loved, and feeling witnessed and heard. And that is probably one of the best things you can ever do for somebody that is in grief, and one of the best things you can do for yourself. So, with that, again, keeping it very simple is key, not overthinking it, including a little bit of poetry. Maybe you have, gosh, you know what? Even doing like the walks that people do, fundraising walks, things like that. I'm not a huge person, like, I don't do a lot of that kind of thing, but some people really find a lot of comfort in that when they can actively participate in their grief with other people. It does so much good because you are actively engaged with the grief, you're expressing yourself, and you're being supported by people that care about you. So, in my program, in my circles, and in my book, I'm focusing a lot on grief ritual, ceremony, and grieving in community, keeping it simple and using it as a way to continue your relationship with your loved one and honoring your own grieving process. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm looking forward to the next one already. Have a great day. Bye-bye.